Hello, friends. My name is Diane Donnelly, and I am the team leader of a small group here in Annapolis that sells real estate. The Donnelly Group of Keller Williams flagship of Maryland, and we want to welcome you to Facts, Not Fears. And this is a series born from COVID, and we wanted to bring you some information so that people like you can make informed decisions based on facts and not fears. And today's topic is one that is more important, I think, than ever. It's one that is near and dear to my heart because I get to hear some amazing stories when I'm out and about talking to my sellers. And some of them are very sad and difficult, and I do a lot of estate sales, so I hear some tough stuff out there. But today's topic is talking about long-term care and having what-if conversations. Today, we're going to talk and encourage you to have these tough but necessary conversations. And we're going to talk today with Tara. Tara Frame is one of the attorneys with Frame & Frame in Pasadena, and she's got an local office here in Annapolis. And I'm going to read, Tara, just quickly, some of the things that you cover are elder law, guardianships, wills and trusts, living wills, powers of attorney, estate planning, estate administration, and probate. And I will leave the personal stuff to you, Tara. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me on today. This is wonderful. I love educating people and getting the correct information out there so people are informed and can make good decisions. A little bit about me. I have been practicing for about 26 years now, believe it or not. And my father started the practice back in 1954, and I joined the practice in 1996. So I had about 6 years where he could teach me everything he knew. I started out general practitioner, but then decided that I really loved working with the estate planning, helping people get their affairs in order, helping people, when they really needed me, when a loved one passed. So, these are things that are important, and that, I'm glad that I can be there when people need me. What we're trying to encourage people is to not wait until the last minute and to really plan ahead so that they're not scrambling and dealing with, major decisions in a crisis type situation. So that's why pre-planning is so important, where you can make these decisions when, you're of sound mind, everything's calm, there's no chaos, and you really can make informed decisions about what you want in different circumstances and in the event of a crisis.
Thank you for that, because I may have told you before, Tara, that when we did my father's estate planning, it was when he was going in for quintuple bypass surgery. Mm-hmm. And that is not the time to say, Dad, well, if this happens, do you want this? And if God forbid, if you stop breathing, do you want, what do you want? That's not the time to do that. And right. I think it was at that point that I really became an advocate for estate planning and just I don't like these conversations. I hate having the conversations. Still, my beautiful mom is sitting over there, and we have to have that conversation with Mom about what do you want to do when the time comes. But when we talk about long-term care planning, what is it that we're talking about?
When you're talking about long-term care planning, you're generally going to be talking about elder law. So, you have an estate planning attorney is not necessarily an elder law attorney, and an elder law attorney is not necessarily an estate planning attorney, because they're looking at two different things. So an elder law attorney is really trying to plan for you while you're still alive, trying to plan for long-term care costs if you have to go into skilled nursing home facility. Whereas estate planning is really solely looking at what's going to happen when you die. How is everything going to be distributed? Who's going to get what at what ages, and wills and trusts, which only take place after you pass. With both areas, you're still going to want powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney. That is part of both. But I will point out that when I see estate plans from another office, they do have different provisions in their powers of attorney that don't necessarily give the family the power to do long-term care planning if needed for, let's say, if they're going into a nursing home. So powers of attorney are a little bit more complicated than people think they are. Everybody thinks you can just print one off the internet, sign it, and you're good to go. But that doesn't always work. And especially when families come in and they say, like, you know, my parents going into a nursing home, what are we going to do? We cannot afford $10,000 or $12,000 a month because we have to worry about our mom. How are we going to take care of her in the future if we go through all the family money because dad's in the nursing home? What are we going to do? So, you know, these are all issues that we sit down and we have to analyze and look at, you know, the family finances, what the plan is. We have to look at the powers of attorney and make sure that they have the powers that they need to do what they need to do with the long-term care plan. So, you know, it is a rather complex area and
Huge topic.
You know, yeah. And, you know, people just, they need to go to a professional who knows kind of in the outs and all the different issues and complexities that are involved.
Yeah, and you said something that I want to talk about. So it's a whole lot cheaper to go online and do these forms than going to somebody like you. It's a whole lot cheaper. And you're not looking for cheap when you're talking about your assets, and you're not looking for cheap when you're talking about what am I going to do in the future or when I get sick. You're not looking for cheap. You're looking for right. You want to be thorough. Terry, you and I have had a conversation about estate plans that you've reviewed, and you said this entire part wasn't even discussed. This part wasn't even protected. This child would have gotten nothing. So it's such an important thing. You don't skip these steps. But hi, Katie, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Right. So yeah, you can go online, download these documents, sign it, and hope that everything is covered. But the conversations that we've had does not suggest that that's a good way to go.
No, I mean, you know, if you don't, like an estate plan, you know, it's kind of like, I see it as insurance. You know, you have car insurance and everybody pays their car insurance, right? They pay their homeowner's insurance. Most of the time, you're not going to use your car insurance. You know, you pay for your insurance hoping that you don't use it. And that's the same with an estate plan. You know, you need to have good coverage. You need to have a good plan in place, hoping that none of these things will happen. But if they do happen, it's all there. It's all set. You don't have to worry about it. You're not frantic running around with your head cut off when dad or mom's going into the nursing home. And now we're asking, well, what does the power of attorney say? Are we permitted to do these things that we need to do? Are we going to be able to transfer assets? Are we going to be able to do irrevocable trust planning or, you know, asset protection planning? And, you know, I mean, if you don't do it every day, you're not going to know what to look for. You're not going to know the nuances and what are the issues. But, you know, if that's what I do every day, and this is what I'm trained to look for. So, you know, I don't expect my clients to know or not know what they have. But I will tell you, you know, I have some situations recently where I've done an estate plan for a client, and now the spouse is coming in saying, you know, now we've had a change, or the daughter came in, we've had a change, we have issues, he's going into a nursing home, what do we do now? And luckily, I had done the power of attorney, so I knew that power had all the provisions that we needed. I didn't even have to worry about it. Because sometimes if you have like just a basic Maryland statutory power of attorney, it's not going to give you the powers to move assets or transfer assets or retitle real property. And then we have to go get a guardianship with the court, which can take, you know, 2 or 3 months. So now we're wasting time where the family's paying $10,000 or $12,000 a month to a nursing home while we're in the process of trying to get the guardianship order so that now we can do the planning that we need to do.
Yeah. Well,
so long-term care planning is there. That can get a little complex and complicated.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. I read a statistic actually on your website, Tara, frameandframe.com, and it says 70% of people over the age of 65 will require long-term care services, which currently average $7,000 per month. How do you prepare for that?
Well, like I said, if you have properly drafted documents and you have a good plan in place, that's going to either they come in later on when they're looking at going into a nursing home, then we're going to deal with that situation. But if we're looking forward long-term, we're just going to make sure that we have everything in place so that can be easily converted into a different type of plan if that's what we need to do, so that we can deal with, preserving the assets for the family and trying to minimize the amounts that they're going to pay out of pocket for that skilled nursing home. What happens is most people, want to stay home for as long as possible, and families will try to keep their loved ones home for, caring for them. But sometimes it just gets to the point where you have an unhealthy spouse caring for someone who needs severe, a lot of care, 24-hour care. They're bedridden at this point. They can't bathe themselves. They can't dress themselves. They can't feed themselves. So at some point, I mean, statistically, at some point, that person may have to go temporarily into a skilled nursing facility to get that care that the spouse can't provide any longer.
If we get off this call today, Tara, and we have touched somebody to say, today's the day that you do your planning, not when you're sick. This pandemic has made it abundantly clear that your planning is done now, today, not next week, not in a month. We have people that are on ventilators who are 50 years old. Planning needs to be done now. You and I did a deal together, a transaction together. I was selling the home. You were helping with the estate plan. And the husband was taking care of his ailing wife, and she was early stages of dementia. She was in and out of lucidity, and we weren't sure if we could have her sign or not. Talk about powers of attorney, how easy it is to get and why we need them.
Right. So powers of attorney, sometimes people think a will is the most important, but that a will only takes place after you die. And sometimes the statutes may or may not get your property to where you intend it to be. But, as important, if not more important, is a power of attorney. And like I said, a well-drafted power of attorney, because with that situation, if the husband has a power of attorney, he was able to act on behalf of the wife. So he was able to sign the contract. He was able to sign the settlement documents for her and have those transactions go through. It's really important. I talk to a lot of financial advisors and real estate agents. If people don't have powers of attorney and someone becomes incapacitated or incompetent in the middle of a transaction, basically everything stops. So if they don't have a power of attorney, nothing can go forward. If the stock market crashes and your parents don't have a power of attorney appointing you, then the stockbroker's hands are tied. They can't do anything with your money. They can't transfer it. They can't protect it. It basically, it could go all down the drain because they can't do anything without either that person giving them instructions or the power of attorney. So a power of attorney is really powerful. And like with real estate, I even know sometimes we have to do limited powers of attorney, or we have to include the property address in the power of attorney if a sale is imminent, to make sure that there's not going to be any hiccups along the way and everything is going to go smoothly. The power of attorney, the attorney in fact can sign the documents, they can appear at settlement, so they can basically take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. So it's a really important document. I do give an example. One of my parents' friends had a construction company, and he was just sitting in the mall parking lot, had a massive stroke in his car. He did not have a power of attorney. His wife, basically her hands were tied because a lot of the assets were solely in his name. They weren't jointly held. His company was just in his name. She couldn't get into any of the company records. She couldn't pay the employees because she couldn't get in to write checks. So they didn't have any money because they're not getting paid. And she couldn't take care of any of the household bills. No one would give her information because she wasn't the person because of the HIPAA laws. So we were in the process of getting a guardianship, which was going to take 3 or 4 months. We were trying to get an expedited emergency guardianship order, but unfortunately he passed away before that happened. But had they had just a power of attorney, which is the cost is so nominal considering the ramifications, she could have avoided all of the stress and mental anguish that she went through for that, that 30-day period that we were trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that and in what kind of forms should people have. And we had a person on a call about 2 or 3 weeks ago who had COVID, and he told his wife, here's the file. This is where you're going to find passwords. This is where you're going to find XXX, because he thought this might be it for me. Again, he was maybe 50, and I can't underscore this enough is to get these plans now while you're healthy, especially you've got children. What do you want to happen to them? If you get sick, what do you want to happen to them? I mean, to you, and what um, life-saving things do you want to have taken care of, and what don't you want to do? So these are things that are so important in the advanced directive area, right?
Right.
Things that you can consider.
Yeah, and I will say, and it's, and there's so many different types of families these days. There's blended families. I had one the other day, and she has 3 kids, he has 3 kids, and they were trying to figure out, well, what if I die and then everything goes to him? What if he gets remarried? And then he's married to his new spouse for 10 years and he leaves everything to her, then my children are disinherited. So with blended families, and there's a lot of families now, the partners aren't married, or you have domestic partnerships. So if you're not technically married legally, then your partner is not going to receive anything under the law unless it's all in writing and you have it in a will or a trust. So all of these different types of familial situations where you don't have a traditional marriage, there's a lot of issues to be dealt with. So it's important to think about this. Even just a family, I have families that, with new babies, they're like, well, we don't really have anything. We have a house and a car. Right. But you also have a child. So who's going to take care of that child? Have you named a guardian? Have you named a custodian or a trustee? I've had a situation where there was nothing in place, and I've had, mom's parents and dad's parents fighting over who's going to get the kid. Where is the child going to live? Are they going to live in Maryland, or the other one's going to move them to North Carolina? And now you have a whole custody case. It's just going to take a year in court. The child's being interviewed by, custody evaluators and social workers. And this is something you don't want your child to go through. No. It's not a pleasant experience. And then, you don't want to.
Question.
Oh, sure.
So the reason why I joined this call is my husband and I are both a little older. He's 42, I'm 41. We have a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard in the state of that if you don't have a will in place, that the child goes to the state and then they fight over him. And so I'm trying to figure out how that works. And then on the other flip side of it is I have 2 stepsons that live in Virginia. So I don't know how to make my will work.
Right. So with children, your biological parent is the natural custodian. So if one parent passes away, the other biological parent will be the custodian or guardian. But let's say both parents pass away and there's nothing in place, then it's a matter of both families the families on both sides are going to be fighting over. It could be your sister and his mother and his sister. Everybody says, well, I want that child. I'm the best person to take care of the child. And like I said, the court's going to decide. The child's never going to go to the state per se, but somebody would have temporary guardianship until the court could decide on where the child would be placed permanently, who's going to take care of the child on a day-to-day basis, and then who's going to take care of the child's money. So those are 2 different topics that the court would decide. When you have stepchildren, yeah, if you wanted to provide for your stepchildren, they're not going to get anything from your estate unless it's part of your will, because they're not your biological children. So only, under Maryland law, only blood relatives are going to receive, unless there are no blood relatives. You have no parents, no siblings, no nieces or nephews. And then potentially way down the line, a stepchild could receive if there's nobody else. So, that's not something you want to just kind of leave up to chance or up to luck. Most people would want their stuff, their property to go to certain people and make sure that they're cared for. If you have minors or special needs children, we can put it in trust so that they don't get money until they're of a certain age, or they don't have control of that money so that they can't waste it. With special needs children on benefits, that's a whole nother issue. You can't leave an inheritance to them because they would lose all of their benefits. So we have to be careful that they don't lose eligibility for, Medicaid or medical assistance, housing credits, food stamps, these types of things. So, it gets complicated, and it's really on a case-by-case basis. I meet with clients, I get to know them and what their needs are, and then we figure out what are their unique needs, and then we develop a plan around that.
Okay.
So there's no cookie cutter plan, really. There's really no cookie cutter that you're going to push a button on the internet, put in a few names, and it's going to give out, it's going to give out the same form for everybody, and it doesn't apply to everybody. Because, like you said, you have children, you have stepchildren, you might not be married, you might, have no children, and you want to leave it to other relatives, nieces and nephews, or brothers and sisters. So, every plan is different and unique, because every family is different and unique.
Mm-hmm. Which is another reason why these online things are that's not the thing to do for what we're doing here with the estate planning. And I encourage my friends and clients to have a long-term care folder where they put all of the things that are important. What would you suggest be in that folder?
Well, for a long-term care folder, so if they have their obviously they'd want to put where either their copy of their powers of attorney, their advance directive, living will, or where they can find these things. For their family, they should have passwords, a list of all their accounts, life insurance. That's one thing. Sometimes people don't know what life insurance is, and you don't get statements. So unless you have that information readily available, those benefits might never get paid out because no one knows where to find them. So it's important to have all that, information where your family can find it. And we have some great guides on our website at frameandframe.com. One, it's 30 pages. It's kind of a really great overview of long-term care planning and Medicaid planning and asset protection. We have another one for family protection planning. So, if you want more information, those are really great resources. But it's really important for the families to have these discussions. You don't know how many times I have a situation where someone passes away, and then the family, I said, well, what are the assets? What did they own? What are we dealing with? And they're like, we have no idea. They were secretive. They didn't tell us anything. And so we're trying, then we're having to write to all the local banks to find out if there were any accounts anywhere, calling and kind of researching and investigating. And it makes it really difficult for the family when they're in that situation and maybe don't even have money to pay for the funeral bills because we don't know where to get, access to the money or the policies or the accounts.
Yeah, I had a relative who wanted me to be the keeper of that information in addition to her nuclear family. But in it had all of her account numbers, her doctors, the names, the medicines that she was on, the password list for her finances, her health insurance information, a copy of her health card, so that everything was just in one file that should anything, God forbid, be needed, that it was there. And she had it locally with her nuclear family, and then her extended family, I was holding on to that.
That's fantastic. If everybody did that, it would make, the family's life so much easier. It would be such a gift.
Yeah, it was amazing to do that, because then I took the same information and did it with my family. So I have all that in one place as well. When we're talking about powers of attorney, do you need one power of attorney and that covers healthcare, financial as well? Or is that different powers of attorney?
Yeah, generally there's two. There's a financial power of attorney, which is going to cover all the financial. You can rent and sell and manage investments, stocks, bonds, bank accounts. And then you're going to have the healthcare power of attorney, which is going to be if you're incompetent, incapacitated, or unable to make decisions yourself, this person is going to be able to communicate with the doctors and make those decisions for you. And along with that, most people want what's called an advance directive, also called a living will, which basically is a document saying that I'm making this decision now that if death is imminent, if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, if I'm brain dead, I don't want you to keep my body pumping, my heart pumping, my lungs pumping with breathing tubes and feeding tubes. Just give me pain medication and let nature take its course. So that's basically you making the decision now and telling your healthcare agent, this is what I want you to do in this situation. So that it kind of takes that pressure off of them, and they're not making that decision. They know you've already made that decision, and this is what you want them to do.
Now, this is a question that I'm always puzzled about. So you've got this advance directive, you did your due diligence, you did your homework, and you got it all taken care of. And I went to Tara and I said, draft this, you did it, I've got it, I've got the document. I have a bad car accident, God forbid, knock on wood, have a bad car accident, they take me to the hospital, they're doing stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to keep me alive. Where's the gap between this hard file that I have at my house versus going to the hospital? When do they get that? How do they know, okay, here's her advanced directives, this is what she wants, don't add any breathing tubes or do the breathing? How do they know if I've got this file just sitting at home with my loved ones?
Yeah, generally they're not going to unless they call a family member and then the family member brings that to the hospital. We do have a program where we provide our clients with a card that has a PIN number, and so it's in your wallet that you can keep there. So if something did happen, you just go to a computer, put in the PIN number, and you can get access to all of the healthcare powers of attorney and the HIPAA and the advanced directive and print it off right there. So you don't have to have that hard copy with you. So that's a great program that we do offer.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But you know, if we have all of this well thought out, but we don't have it at the hospitals, it's just like, you know, the prescriptions, and how does one doctor know today that you're taking a medicine that isn't going to be in conflict with the one that they're giving you? They can go online and they can look up the other medicines that you're getting at different places. That has to be the case with estate planning. Like that has to happen eventually.
Unfortunately, I'm surprised that there isn't one, but there's no central repository for any documents like this. They're generally in somebody's, you know, drawer in their house, which is why it's important to let the family know where these things are, give them a copy, your power of attorney, so that they have it and they'll be able to use it and make those decisions that they need to. But yeah, you know, a lot of people don't give these, you know, you should really give them to your primary care doctors and your major providers, so that they have them on file, but most people don't. So basically you would be hooked up to, you know, respirators and feeding tubes and breathing tubes until that person got to the hospital and notified the doctors that that's not what you want, and to take it all away.
Homework assignment number one is, everybody after this call your primary care and make sure that documentation gets there. And then we had another question, Tara. Are you allowed to be a power of attorney if you're just a friend but not a relative?
Oh yes, definitely. It's a matter of who you trust the most to make either those financial decisions and manage your financial affairs, or make those healthcare decisions. That's the person that you want to appoint. That can be anybody. It does not have to be a family member. So
Okay.
whoever's your most trustworthy person, that's who you want to pick. And then we usually have a backup in case something happens to that person or they can't fulfill those duties.
Which is another good point. How often should you revisit your estate plan?
I recommend every 3 to 5 years. It doesn't mean that you're actually changing it or revising it, but I suggest everybody at least pull out their documents, take a look at their plan, see if anything's changed. You know, a lot of times there's a death or a birth or a divorce, and those are things that you need to deal with, because let's say you get divorced, your will might change by operation of law somewhat, but your powers of attorney do not. So if you have your ex-spouse as your financial power of attorney or your healthcare power of attorney, more than likely the clients that I talk to do not want their ex making their healthcare decisions, whether to pull the plug or managing their
Yeah, that's not a good time.
No. So.
Well, and I've heard that divorces are up because of this pandemic. So homework assignment number 2, if you have an ex, change it. Right?
That's right.
Okay, so I wanted to share one story with you. So Tara, I was sharing with you before the call, but I had a son who called me and wanted to sell his recently deceased mom's home. And we were talking, and I was asking questions to determine who has the rights to sell the home, and who's the personal representative, who's the executor, what documentation do they have, et cetera. And this person shared with me that his father has some wealth and has not yet done his estate plan. And I was curious to know that what would happen if, because he is the personal representative of the sale of the home that I'm going to sell. And I wondered what would happen, God forbid, if he passed before the house sold. And to complicate it, so the wife doesn't have a will, husband doesn't have a will, and now both are getting ready to pass away. What would happen?
Right. And right. So you and I have talked about the situation. So in that situation, it would be somewhat complicated. Not complicated, but there's procedures and processes it would have to go through. So it would really delay the process and the ability to sell the house, because if the mother didn't have a will, father would be first in line. I mean, yeah, father's first in line to act as the executor, and he is the executor. And then if something happens to him, the children are then equally in line to act as a successor executor. In that particular situation, daughter is estranged. So daughter hasn't been involved in the family for several years and son has. So it would then become a fight between the son and the daughter as to who would take over those duties and handle the estate. And if she didn't agree, then it would end up in a hearing before the orphans court down at the courthouse. So we would be in front of the orphans court and letting them make a decision as to which one should be the executor. And that hearing right now, you know, it's taking 3 months to get a hearing. So your settlement is pushed off probably 4 months. And then the court could decide neither of them are going to be executor. They're going to appoint an independent person, which is generally one of the local lawyers, you know, attorneys in Anne Arundel County.
And I can't even wrap my head around the thought of having all of these things that I've worked very hard for to be distributed at the discretion of someone I don't know, who is just doling out things based on what they think. I can't even go there in my mind to think that
Right.
that would happen.
Right.
Homework assignment number 3, don't let that happen. Do these things. So the 4 documents we've talked about before, Tara, as a recap, is you need a healthcare power of attorney, you need a financial power of attorney, an advance directive or living will, and up-to-date will and testament.
A will or a trust. Yes.
Okay. And we've talked about that before. Now, let me ask you one last question. What happens if you pass away or become incapacitated and you've got nothing in place whatsoever? Is that similar, or is that the same as the scenario that I just shared with you?
Say that again.
So if you become incapacitated and you have no legal documents in place, what happens?
So in that situation, the family, somebody would have to step up, whoever wants to take over your managing your finances and your healthcare decisions, and they'd have to file for a guardianship. So we have several of those pending right now, where we have to file a petition for guardianship of the person and the property. And you have to file a petition with the court. They potentially appoint another attorney that has to meet with the person, report to the court, then they send in for a hearing. The court then decides who's going to be the guardian to take care of the person and the property. And that again takes probably about at least 6 months and many thousands of dollars in court hearings. So that's what happens in that situation, where we could avoid that whole process by just having the powers of attorney in place.
Which is the other reason why I say to people, don't do this stuff on your own, because if you're not doing it because of the expense of doing it up front, can you imagine the expense of doing it on the back end after you make the decision not to do it on the front end? It's much cheaper to do it the right way at the front end than to wait.
That is definitely, yes. I mean, it's more expensive money-wise, it's also expensive time-wise and mentally, you know, mental anguish of having to go through that whole guardianship process.
Okay, and we have one final question, and I think we've answered this, Tara. It says, what happens if you face a life-threatening situation and you don't have advance directives? What happens?
Well, it's going to be a toss-up. Who's going to make the decision? Probably whoever arrives at the hospital first from your family.
I hope it's somebody that you like.
I mean, really, you know, your spouse. Generally, the doctor's going to look at your spouse first. But if there's no spouse, then, you know, I guess it's the kids fighting over what they think should happen, and whoever shows up to the hospital, or the doctors are going to just keep the person alive as long as possible. If they don't feel comfortable that with someone making that decision, then they're going to just keep the person alive for as long as they can.
Yeah. Something you don't want to leave up to fate. Tara, I appreciate that. Kayla, are there any other questions on the chat box?
I just have one quick question. We talked about my stepsons. Is that all covered in the will, or how does that work as far as who gets them? I mean, obviously, if their mother is still alive, they would stay with her. But as far as like how we elect to leave what our assets are to the kids. Is that all covered in the will part?
Yes. So when you and your husband both pass, everything that you own is going to be determined by what is in the will. So however you distribute it to the children in the will, that's how it's going to go. And then if their mother passes away and then something happens to their dad, then their dad would need to, your husband would need to have a nomination of guardian to appoint a guardian who he thinks is the best person or people suited to care for his children. So that needs to all be in writing and signed and witnessed to be effective and enforceable.
Right, but it's in the will, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, and so if you want to, there is a phenomenal checklist and many different types of checklists and guides on Tara's website. If you go to frameandframelaw.com, and then you go to news and resources, guides, and then checklist for long-term care planning, that's where you will find that. In addition, if you look here on this page, you will find my information and Tara's information, and Tara would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. But if you go there, grab one of the guides or several of the guides, it's information that you don't want to miss. And if you find that this is going to be helpful for anybody that you know, please share this recording with your people so that we don't find them in any of the difficult situations that I'm sure that Tara deals with on a regular basis. And I thank you for coming. I thank you for watching. Tara, I thank you for sharing your time and talents with us and coming on and giving your information to us.
Thank you. I always enjoy chatting with you, Diane.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Take care,
Tara.
everyone.
Diane.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.